it is your friendo, the Lady Ms. Vagina Jenkins, and in keeping with the current times where we are revisiting and reconsidering old ideas because of Mercury retrograde, I want to share with you some previously released content that I am re-releasing now during the Mercury retrograde so we can revisit it together with fresh eyes. Before we get into the video, though, I want to remind y'all about some ways in which you can support my life and livelihood. One way is to become a member of this channel. Membership in this channel starts at $3.99 a month. You get really cool perks like custom emojis and loyalty badges and getting to see content before anybody else does, as well as private community posts talking about the astrology transits in the air right now. Perhaps the monthly membership is outside your capacity, which I would totally understand. Please instead consider the idea of doing a tip using the thanks button below. Can't financially support at this time? I absolutely understand that. And would like to remind you that some of the best ways to support me for free 99 are by telling your friends, family, and networks about my channel, because I am trying to get to that 1,000 subscriber monetization threshold. Or perhaps you have capacity to stream my videos while you're doing other things. Perhaps playing my videos at night while you're resting on low volume. As long as there's no ad blockers involved and at least a little bit of volume, it absolutely counts towards the viewing hours. So yes, those are some of the ways in which you can support me in surviving capitalism. So, you know, choose your own adventure. All right, enough of that stuff. Thank you so much for supporting me and this channel. And thank you, as always, for making time for queer astrology. Let's check out the video. Hi, I am the Lady Ms. Vagina Jenkins, and it is time for queer astrology. Did you know that there are so many ways to engage with and use astrology to help you understand the world and your place in it? Let's talk about them. Natal astrology basically creates a birth chart to each individual based on the time, place, and date of your birth. It's basically a snapshot of the sky at the exact moment of your birth and from the perspective of the place where you were born. People use their natal charts to help them understand how they navigate the world, their vitality and energy levels. You can use natal astrology to help understand your finances, how you do money, your values around money. People use natal astrology to understand their careers or purpose, their love life. There are just so many ways to engage with natal astrology and really understanding yourself and how your energy lies and your motivations in the world. Like I said, I think natal astrology is the most popular type of astrology right now, but there are so many other ways to engage with astrology. So let's talk about some other types of astrology. Like number 2, cultural astrology. So just the same as we look at the sky now to understand the world and how we navigate it, cultures throughout time and across the globe have used astrology to do the exact same thing. In the modern Western world, we mainly use what's known as tropical astrology, but tropical astrology has its roots in the astrology of ancient Kemet in Africa. So many Greek, Roman, and European scholars went to study in Kemet and used the concepts they learned there to develop tropical astrology as well as their own systems of astrology. There is a particular Irish cultural astrology that I'm really curious about. Um, there's also other branches of astrology like Vedic astrology. I love how Vedic astrology is so centered on the moon and understanding its minute movements throughout the day and how that affects oneself. I also love the way those charts are designed in a sort of rectangle or square instead of the traditional or the circle charts that we know from tropical astrology. Some of you might even be familiar with Chinese astrology, the 12 animal system. I myself am a fire snake. Subtle flex. There are even ancient branches of astrology from Jewish and Islamic cultural traditions. These astrological scholars in those traditions, of course, were very clear to delineate between the noticing of the stars versus the worshiping of the stars, right? Because that would be haram. Which, this is a really good time to mention that astrology is not an innately spiritual or religious practice. Astrologers come from all walks of life. There are Christian astrologers, there are Jewish astrologers, there are atheist astrologers. I myself am a hoodoo astrologer, and astrology is not so much a spiritual or intuitive practice, but rather a noticing, a gathering of data, a noticing of data, a synthesizing of data, and a noticing of patterns. And that's more mathematical and geometry based than it is religious or spirituality based in any kind of way, at least in my estimation. Argue with me in the comments. Number 3, Synastry, the astrology of connection. So, you know how you have a natal chart? Well, so does your potential lover or partner or bestie. Um, Synastry is basically the idea that we take your natal chart and the natal chart of another person, overlay them to understand the ways in which these two charts interact with each other. Do they trigger each other? Do they support each other? What are the patterns we notice when we put these two charts together? Now, synastry is primarily used in romantic or love relationships, but it can be used with, like I said, any other person, your best friend, your coworker, to understand your relationship to your parents, for a parent to understand their relationship to their kids. There are just so many uses for synastry to understand our relationships with others that are not necessarily just rooted in the idea of romantic heterosexual love. Just throwing that out there. So, to my aromantic friends, please get your synastry charts done with your besties because they're just as important. Number 4, medical astrology. This is where I have to offer the disclaimer. Please, if you are experiencing any sort of medical injury, crisis, emergency, consult with a medical professional, not an astrologer. So I haven't seen too many modern day astrologers using medical astrology, but it is an absolutely fascinating Hellenistic tradition or traditional astrology tradition. So each of the 12 signs is associated with some part of the body, and each of the planets are associated with some part of the body. So conceivably, you could look at someone's natal chart and see where things are placed to understand potential ailments, potential chronic illnesses, or issues that may come up because of astrological transits. A famous example I think of is the example of Virgo and their tummy troubles. So Virgo rules the gut and the digestive system. And then Virgo's planetary ruler is Mercury, which is in charge of the central nervous system. And so a lot of times astrologers have noticed that folks with heavy Virgo energy in their chart, sun, moon, rising, maybe a Virgo stellium, will experience the kind of like stress and anxiety induced tummy troubles, gut issues, that kind of thing. Again, while medical astrology is really interesting, please always, if you're experiencing a medical crisis, consult with a medical professional first and foremost. Please, thank you. Number 5, Horary astrology. Horary? I have such a difficult time saying that word. At any rate, Horary astrology is also, it's pretty rare in a modern astrological context. It's a traditional Hellenistic technique to understand or at least answer a yes or no question. What happens is a client will pose a yes or no question to an astrologer, and then that astrologer makes a chart based on the exact time that that question is asked, and of course the date, but from their own location rather than the location of the querent. Anyway, once that chart is made, you can look at that chart and sort of understand the patterns to determine yes or no to any particular question. Folks will ask questions like, oh, will I get the job? Or conversely, will I be fired? Or will they accept my proposal? Yes or no, that kind of thing. I am absolutely intrigued by the skill it must take to be a horary astrologer. However, I feel like it goes against some of my core values around astrology, in that I want to always approach astrology with curiosity, openness, and expansiveness, and not a kind of fixed, prescriptive, predictive approach to astrology. I also wonder if even asking for such a consult affects the outcome of the yes or no question, kind of like a Schrodinger's astrology kind of vibe. Number 6, electional astrology. I want so much to grow into an amazing electional astrologer. Electional astrology helps people determine the best timing for events, and usually with like a number of different options. For example, it's famously rumored that Nancy and Ronald Reagan kept an electional astrologer on retainer. That way they could consult around big events. You know, what's the best time for Ronnie to announce that he's running for president? What's the best time for us to meet with so-and-so for a dignitary? What's the best time for us to deny the severity of the HIV/AIDS crisis? You know, that kind of thing. A more common use of electional astrology, and I think that most people will recognize this, is wedding planning. For example, everybody wants the perfect June wedding, but what if Venus is in retrograde during the month of June? Or Gemini season is somehow like squared one of you or your partner's charts? An electional astrologer can sit with you both to look at your charts, your synastry charts, and compare that to the upcoming transits to help you select some options for the best date that would contribute to the best outcomes for your relationship. Number 7 is locational astrology, also known as AstroCartography. That sounds so fancy. So, did you know that you can use your natal chart to help you figure out the best places to visit, live, or maybe even just vacation in? An astrocartographer could sit with you to understand the best places in the world that would serve your purposes. For example, like living or visiting a Venus line might be really useful in having an international lover. Or maybe you're just trying to move locally and you're trying to find the best community to start your family in. And finally, mundane astrology, which I find super fascinating. So if every place has its own natal chart, right? That means it has its own energetic signature. And then what patterns have emerged in that place over time? So a mundane astrologer has an intricate understanding of history, as well as an intricate understanding of astrology. And then when you put those two things together, you can start to create patterns of the world. Like, for example, what are the commonalities between pandemics? What transits were happening in the sky during the Spanish flu that might be the same as transits that are happening now during COVID? Just in such awe of mundane astrologers. It takes years of study to understand the historical events and their patterns, and then to be able to take that data and make predictive models. Just chef's kiss. Of course, there are so many more ways for people to engage with astrology. There are so many more astrological techniques that we could talk about, but these are the main tools in most astrologers' toolkits. And hey, if you learned something from this video, please subscribe. There's new content every Wednesday. And yeah, like and comment below. Did you know about these different types of astrology before this video? Tell me. Let's discuss it more in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. And once again, I am the Lady Ms. Vagina Jenkins, and thank you for making time for queer astrology.